He was given the honors of an empress, the gowns of a bride, and the name of a dead woman. He stood at the right hand of the most powerful man on earth. But he was a boy. This is the story of a Roman emperor who, twisted by grief, decided his wife would not stay dead. So he chose a living replacement, a young boy named Sporus, and forced him into an identity that would send shockwaves through the Roman Empire. But this isn't just about a mad emperor. It's about a boy who had to navigate the deadly politics and cruelty of the imperial court just to stay alive. It's a story about what happens when your very existence is a performance, and the cost of dropping the mask is death. So, how on earth could something like this even happen? To get it, you have to understand the world of mid-1st century AD Rome. And you can forget the stoic senators and disciplined legions from the movies. This was imperial Rome, a glittering, brutal stage where one man's mood was law, and his madness could literally reshape reality. And on that throne sat the most infamous emperor of them all, Nero. Nero was a walking contradiction. He was a student of philosophy who murdered his own mother and his mentor. He fancied himself an artist, a poet, and a musician, but he ruled with an iron fist. In his world, he was the center of the universe, and his emotions dictated the fate of millions. At the heart of this chaos was the one person who seemed to keep him steady, his second wife, the beautiful and ambitious Poppaea Sabina. Ancient historians, who weren't exactly Nero's biggest fans, still paint a picture of a genuine, if obsessive, love. Poppaea wasn't just his wife, she was his partner in power, his muse. He adored her, which is why her death in 65 AD was a catastrophe. The official story is that she died from complications of pregnancy, but darker rumors, written down by historians like Suetonius, claimed Nero himself killed her, kicking her in a fit of rage. Whatever the cause, Nero's grief was as theatrical as he was. He threw a lavish state funeral, burned a fortune in imported incense, and even had her deified, making her an official Roman goddess. But for an emperor who thought he could bend reality to his will, even that wasn't enough. He wanted her back, and in his grief-stricken mind, he thought he found a way. Sometime after Poppaea died, Nero's eyes landed on a young man in his court. We only know him as Sporus, which probably wasn't his real name. It might have been a cruel nickname from the Greek word for seed, a taunt about the future that was about to be stolen from him. We don't know much about his background. He was likely a puer delicatus, a young slave or freedman chosen for his beauty. But Sporus had one quality that sealed his fate. According to the historian Cassius Dio, he looked shockingly like the dead Empress Poppaea. For Nero, this wasn't just a coincidence. It was a sign. In Sporus, he saw a blank canvas on which he could repaint his dead wife. His obsession grew into a plan so twisted, so against every Roman value, that it could only come from a man who believed he was a living god. He wouldn't just keep Sporus as a companion. He would transform him. He was going to make Sporus his bride. The first step in this horrifying transformation was brutal and irreversible. Nero ordered Sporus to be castrated. This wasn't just a physical act. It was the symbolic destruction of his male identity. It was a violent remaking, ensuring Sporus could never be a man in the eyes of Roman society ever again. With Sporus's identity shattered, Nero started building a new one. In 67 AD, he threw a massive public wedding. This wasn't some secret ceremony in the palace. Suetonius tells us it had all the official parts. A dowry was paid, Sporus wore a bride's veil, and huge crowds attended the union. The boy named Sporus was gone. In his place stood Nero's new wife, dressed in the fine robes of a Roman empress. Nero insisted that Sporus be addressed with female titles, Lady, Empress. He reportedly even referred to Sporus as Sabina, forcing the ghost of his dead wife onto a living person. One Roman, quoted by Suetonius, joked darkly that the world would have been better off if Nero's own father had taken such a wife. It was a grim acknowledgement of the horrifying spectacle unfolding at the heart of the empire. Nero didn't just want someone who looked like his wife. He was trying to resurrect her, and he was willing to destroy a young man's life to do it. Life for Sporus became a performance on the biggest stage in the world. As Empress Sabina, he was paraded through Rome and Greece, sitting right beside the emperor in his litter, receiving all the honors that an empress was due. He was a public spectacle, a living, breathing symbol of just how far Nero's power went. The emperor could literally turn a boy into his empress, and the Roman elite, whether out of fear or self-interest, just went along with it. But behind the scenes, it was a gilded cage. Sporus was a living doll, a ghost bride trapped in a nightmare. His entire existence was a role he was forced to play, with every word and gesture dictated by the man who owned him. And yet, there's this one story, a quiet, heartbreaking act of what looks like defiance. It's said that Sporus gave Nero a gift, a ring engraved with the rape of Proserpina. This is the myth of a young goddess who is abducted by the king of the underworld and forced to be his queen. It was an incredibly powerful and dangerous message to send. It suggests that Sporus saw himself for what he was, a person stolen from the world of the living and trapped in a kind of hell. It was a silent plea and a condemnation from a boy who had no other way to speak. Nero's reign of terror couldn't last forever. His paranoia and cruelty had turned the Senate, the military, and the people against him. In 68 AD, the empire finally snapped. A revolt broke out, and the Senate declared Nero an enemy of the state. Abandoned by almost everyone, he fled the city. In his final desperate hours, Nero was with just a handful of freedmen and Sporus. It was to Sporus, still playing the part of his empress, that Nero cried and lamented his fate right before taking his own life. With the tyrant dead, the show should have been over. The man who created the role of Empress Sabina was gone. Sporus should have been free, but he was about to learn that the identity Nero forced on him was a prison he couldn't escape. After Nero's death, Sporus wasn't set free. He became a spoil of war, a living symbol of Nero's reign that other powerful men wanted to possess. He was first taken by the Praetorian prefect Nymphidius Sabinus, who also had ambitions of being emperor. Sabinus treated Sporus as his wife, continuing to call him Poppaea. After Sabinus was killed, Sporus was passed to Otho, one of the generals fighting for power in the chaotic Year of the Four Emperors. And in a truly twisted turn of fate, Otho had been the real Poppaea Sabina's first husband, before Nero made him divorce her. For these men, Sporus wasn't a person. He was a trophy, a connection to imperial power. His final and most humiliating chapter came under the next emperor, Vitellius. Vitellius planned to use Sporus for a sick public spectacle. He was going to force him to be the main character in a real-life play for the Roman crowds, the rape of Proserpina. The very myth Sporus had supposedly used to hint at his own tragedy was now going to be his public humiliation. Faced with this final degradation, Sporus saw only one way out. The role Nero had created for him had followed him beyond the emperor's death, and would now become his public execution. Before he could be dragged into the arena, Sporus, who was likely not even 20 years old, took his own life. It was the first and the last time he had any real control over his own story. The story of Sporus is one of those that gets under your skin, a haunting reminder of the forgotten people whose lives were destroyed by the powerful. If you believe these are the stories that need to be told, subscribe for more from the dark corners of history. And let us know in the comments. Do you think Nero's obsession was driven by grief, madness, or the simple, corrupting nature of absolute power? We only know about Sporus because ancient historians like Suetonius and Cassius Dio wrote him down as Exhibit A in their case against Nero. For them, he was the ultimate proof of an emperor who had shattered every Roman norm. While ancient Rome had complex ideas about gender, including the galley, castrated priests of a goddess, what was done to Sporus was entirely different. This wasn't about religion or identity. It was exploitation, pure and simple. It was the complete erasure of one person to satisfy the ego and grief of another. Sporus's story is a chilling testament to how absolute power can corrupt absolutely, showing that when one man has the power to define reality, other people are forced to live inside his nightmare. He is the silent, tragic echo of a boy who was forced to live and die as a ghost bride.